A YouTube video confession gets us talking about sentencing limits. And Jobs Ohio, could it be more transparent with another governor in charge?
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining guest host Ann Fisher this week, Joe Ingles, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio, Jim Siegel, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Brenda Mack, president of the Ohio Black Republicans Association, and Joseph Moss, chair of the Ohio Hispanic Coalition.
The creative uses of social media continue to break new ground in our society. Recently, a Powell man used YouTube to come clean about his role in a fatal drunk driving accident.
My name is Matthew Cordell, and on June 22nd, 2013, I hit and killed Vincent Canzani. This video will act as my confession. When I get charged, I will plead guilty and take full responsibility for everything I've done to Vincent and his family.
This week, Matthew Cordell was charged, and he did appear in court. While he did not plead guilty at his first appearance, he is expected to plead guilty in the next few weeks and then find out how long he'll have to stay in prison. Joe Moss, you handled drunken driving cases before. Should Matthew Cordell get any special consideration given this kind of confession?
Well, and let's clarify something. First of all, this is a sad story. It's a terrible story. We had a victim and a family that has survived the victim, and we can't forget that. But the second thing that struck me is that the video is really not so much of a confession as much as it is an advocacy piece to talk about the dangers of drinking and driving, and in that is 100% legitimate. The other thing that came to mind on the sentencing part is that I think our society does believe that a remorseful person is on his or her way to rehabilitation. And taking that into consideration, of course, other things that the judges have to take into consideration, possibility of recidivism and so on, that it should be taken into consideration.
But you know, when someone says they're going to take full responsibility, I think there's the expectation that they will go to court and initially plead guilty, and I think that's confusing to just the average person who doesn't understand law as to why he pleaded not guilty when he went in earlier.
It's because of the system here in Franklin County. In order for you to be assigned a judge, unless you're going to plead to the judge that happens to be duty judge on that particular day, and there was a bit of a snafu regarding that, then what you do is you plead not guilty initially, and then that puts you in the hopper for the assignment of the judge. And in this particular case, Judge Feist was assigned to the case.
Is that a good idea for someone to do this? I mean, would this be something that would actually help him when it comes to sentencing?
In other words, is it contrived? Is there some contrivance there to...
None of us, I think, can look into the heart of Mr. Cordell to determine how he feels, but is he doing a positive thing? Could it have a positive impact? This thing has actually gained not only national but international attention, and I think on a very positive level. Now, is it going to help, not help? It's all a gamble. Joe, not only in this case, but in any case.
I mean, he clearly felt he needed to come forward and do this. I mean, and if you watch the whole video, there are, as Joe said, there's some interesting things to it. I mean, not only is he advocating at the end, basically saying, look, I'm doing this because I want to send a message, don't drink and drive, but I mean, he talks about his own life and his depression and how he drinks because of that. And he also talks, I thought it was interesting, he says, I talked to some attorneys who told me to lie, yes, and we can maybe get the blood alcohol thing thrown out, because the police knew it was him. This is not a case where they didn't know who the driver was. They were getting ready to file charges against him. So it's just interesting that he's decided that he's going to forego any effort to try to beat the case.
And he did it through the process of Because I Said I Would, which is a new organization that was created about a year ago for people who want to make promises and make them publicly and follow through on them. And you'll notice he held up the little slip of paper and it said, Because I Said I Would, and he must have promised somebody he was going to come clean.
I think that when I watched the video, I felt like that he was so sincere. And I think that if he could have pled guilty that day, he would have done it we'd be a little further down the road with it. But I agree with you, Attorney, that this is a great thing. I think it will help people come forward. You could tell he was afraid. You could see the emotion. You could see all kinds of things going on with him. But it was also an outlet for him as well. He was able to talk about some things, that maybe he wouldn't otherwise have been able to talk about.
And let me add one other thing. In my experience, 90% of the struggle with these cases, with any criminal case, is not necessarily the acceptance of responsibility, because in many cases the evidence is overwhelming and the individual may very well want to come clean. The real problem has to do with the sentencing and with what is it that you can do as an attorney, what is it that you can do as a defendant, as an accused person, to try to mitigate, to reduce the impact that might that you might be able to suffer.
How much flexibility do judges have nowadays?
Oh, they have quite a bit of flexibility in cases like this. In this particular case, a felony of the second degree, and he's also charged with the OVI, which is 6 months. That's the reason that Ron O'Brien, the county prosecutor, said that they were looking for 8.5 years. It's 8 on the felony of the second degree, and then 6 months on the OVI. But the judge has significant flexibility unless the General Assembly has said that the judge is to exclude or not consider probation, that there is a mandatory minimum of some sort.
I think the uniqueness of this case, I think there's going to be a lot of people watching to see what the judge in fact does do. How much does he take this into account, and how much does it impact in the ultimate sentence?
Mm-hmm. And depending on how much it impacts that sentence, if it's not the max or even near that, some people may take advantage of it as well, thinking that they may get that same treatment.
And that's unfortunate, but you're absolutely right. I think sometimes the public believes that because one individual, one particular case is handled in a way, that's going to happen from now on. It's not that predictable.
Okay, moving on. Democrat Ed Fitzgerald this week laid out what he would do with Jobs Ohio if he is elected governor. Fitzgerald admits he likely would have to work with the quasi-private development agency, but he says he would try to make it more transparent. Try is the key word because he likely would need Republicans in the legislature to agree to the changes. Fitzgerald wants to end Jobs Ohio's exemption to the public records law. He also wants the state auditor, the inspector general, and the ethics commission to be able to provide more oversight than they can now. Jim Siegel, is this a topic that could resonate with voters, or does it get a little too much in the weeds with all of with the inspector general, with the auditor, and the ethics commission?
Well, I think it's going to depend. I mean, I think it can resonate. But it's not just about saying we need more transparency. We need to go. You probably need to go a little further at some points. We're going to need to see okay, this is why we need more transparency. That's what people are going to look for. They're going to look for reasons. Okay, we don't have open records. We don't have open meetings laws that apply to Jobs Ohio. What has that done? Why has that been a bad thing? And we're still almost a year and a half away from the election. So there's going to be more time to look, to maybe see those kind of things develop. Some stories already have. I don't think it's just when people just to hear about transparency, I don't think is going to be enough. I think we're going to need to continue to hear more, and for this to really resonate as a true issue, and something that he can use. And I also think that the jobs numbers, in fact, the number of jobs being created in Ohio will also impact that as well. If he's talking a lot about transparency, but the economy really starts to rebound, I don't know how much people are going to feel like that Jobs Ohio needs to be overhauled.
And another thing we need to be concerned about here, or think about, is that the courts could come in and take some action on this. This has been before the Supreme Court. So far, nothing's really been done. But if I'm guessing that the Democrats will keep hammering away on this, they'll keep it in the courts, and eventually the courts could step in and make changes.
This is really interesting because the issue of Jobs Ohio and the transparency keeps coming up, like Jim says, but I think maybe the people want to hear a little bit more. I'm kind of wondering why maybe other issues that are clearer, the way that Republicans have addressed the issues of the unions, women's health, education, a number of things that I think that they are equally vulnerable with, that maybe my friend Ed can move in that direction and broaden the argument a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I agree that if the economy does pick up and jobs pick up, that this may end up being a non-issue. People, they won't care as much about Jobs Ohio. However, I'm concerned either way how it affects the minority community. Our unemployment rate is still triple and quadruple in some cities than it is in the white communities. And I'd like to know what we are going to do about that.
And if the records aren't open, it's not clear that that's something that they're working on. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if I would like to see more transparency as well. But myself, I don't need to see the records open. I see the urban community. I'm in the urban community. I travel throughout it. I know that the unemployment rate is double, triple, quadruple than it is in white communities. So, Jobs Ohio or not, doesn't matter. What are we going to do about the unemployment rate in the minority communities?
And it could be that is something that the Democrats can use. I think it's a valid argument. It doesn't necessarily matter what the infrastructure might be, but how has it affected the people on the ground, the minority communities, and others.
But now the unemployment rate in the minority community affects the Democrat minorities,
Absolutely.
Republican minorities, independent minorities. So it's not a Republican thing, a Democrat thing. It's not a party issue. It's a people issue.
But we keep seeing on the front pages of the paper, there's this tie to this money given to so-and-so, and this, came out of Jobs Ohio. We keep seeing stories like that. We keep seeing stories where certain businesses that were either given or denied Jobs Ohio money, there are questions raised about why that happened. And what we don't see right now is a clear rubrics as to how that money was given and why. We don't really have enough transparency, at least in the newspaper, to figure out. There's still questions when you read the story. You still have questions at the end of it, and that's going to play into this.
And it'll be interesting. Ed Fitzgerald noted that he probably won't be able to do a tremendous amount because he needs legislative approval to make some of these changes. However, if you get a Democratic governor in charge, and basically, the governor has a lot of influence over Jobs Ohio, the way it's structured right now. Will suddenly the legislature become more open to the idea of opening it up to public records and opening it up to the auditor's office?
Or conversely, if there was a Democratic governor in charge when it was enacted in the first place, would it have had more openness to it to start out with?
Right.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Ed assumed that we were going to have a Republican General Assembly. I mean, I hope that his anticipation is that we were going to have a Democratic General Assembly.
Well, I won't respond to that one right there. However, do you think that these things happen because there's no one watching the kids, so to speak? You have this group of people that's over an organization or over a over an issue, an agency. Who's watching who? And that goes for anyone.
Yeah, because they're taking everybody that could potentially be launched away.
So if we end up with a Democratic governor, who's going to watch that governor? Who's going to watch that staff?
Unless the law has changed, no one.
So,
right. Moving on. Speaking of Jobs Ohio and transparency, Democrat John Patrick Carney is running on those issues as he tries to unseat Republican Auditor Dave Yost. Carney, a state rep from Columbus, formally announced his campaign this week. While Yost has been critical of Jobs Ohio, the current auditor has not been aggressive enough, according to Carney and others, in actually investigating Jobs Ohio finances. Joe Ingles, Dave Yost is the only Republican office holder to question the transparency issues and the makeup of Jobs Ohio. Can John Carney really make hay of that?
Well, it depends. You know, we know that Dave Yost wanted to audit Jobs Ohio. He had a lot of questions about it, and so many questions that Republican lawmakers came in this year and passed legislation that basically ties his hands in most of this. However, he is still working on an audit, and he tells me that it will be out probably mid to late October, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance that he doesn't see there. And we don't know how far he's gone with that, how much he's been able to get with this first audit. That if he goes in and tries to do anything in the future, his hands are tied. But this first audit, he will have more information than he can have in the future. So that's going to be a big question. I think the Democrats are trying to make the point they think that he should have done more up to this point. They think that much like Governor Kasich saying he wants Medicaid expansion but not calling for the legislature to come back in and actually address it, they see this situation the same way, that Dave Yost should have done more up to this point to make sure that the audit was done and that there were questions answered.
Well, he didn't win any Republican popularity contests with what he did do. I mean, how far could he have gone among Republicans at that point?
You know, he has a history of being transparent, and that's one of the great things about Auditor Yost. But, you know, this is the beginning of the campaign season, basically. It's time to start throwing mud, and this is a big issue. So I'm sure the new candidate wants just to get that out and start slinging as hard and fast as he can to throw people off of that Dave Yost is actually a good auditor.
And let's face it, it's not easy in these down-ticket races sometimes to find, maybe except for Secretary of State, to find issues to grab onto and really drive home with the general public in a campaign, especially when you're also fighting for time with the governor's race and other things. So, you know, I think John Carney, who has already been doing things, he's introduced legislation to open up more transparency to Jobs Ohio, similar to the things that Ed Fitzgerald called for more recently. I think he'll use this, even though he and Dave Yost are somewhat on the same side. I think he'll try to argue that he'll be more aggressive and do things in an even better way than Dave Yost will. But again, sometimes you feel like it's, you know, in these races for treasurer and auditor and so such that sometimes it's a little difficult to really get some solid issues to reach.
There is some symmetry between the topic that Carney is advancing and the topics that Fitzgerald is also advancing. It has to do with auditing transparency. Are you keeping your eye on the taxpayers' money and things? So there is a certain symmetry in that. I think as the campaigns progress, I think the other topics perhaps will come to the forefront, the ones that I'd really like to hear about.
Okay, moving on. Supporters of the Columbus school levy kicked off their campaign with a rally this week. It was an odd rally, on one hand claiming the schools are failing, and on the other hand claiming it's a new day for the district. It's been the same message in this new ad.
I work hard to provide for my children, and I expect them to work hard in school. I want them to receive the best education so they can succeed in life. My dream is for my children to see that our community values them, and in turn, that they value our community. That's why I'm happy to see a plan to provide pre-K education for all children so they're prepared to learn when they start school, and a plan to make sure all neighborhoods have high-quality schools. I'm ready for a new day for Columbus education.
It looks like the prime opposition to the levy will be individual voters upset by the data rigging scandal. So far, no organized opposition has surfaced to urge voters to reject the levy. Joe Moss, is this a preview of the campaign to come? Yeah, we're bad, but we're going to get better, or what?
Boy, I tell you, I don't think we can deny that Columbus Public Schools has serious problems. And I guess the time to solicit the dedication of resources to fix some of those problems is when you have the problems. The fact that some of the solutions cost money should be a surprise to no one. Now, the real culprit here is the fact that we have a formula for funding public schools in the state of Ohio, and who knows, maybe in the vast majority of the states, that is localized. And if we want good public schools here in Columbus, and the data, by the way, and maybe I would invite some of you to tell us what that data is, otherwise I'll mention it, is not good. And the kids are falling through the cracks. failing to graduate, maybe putting the kids and the communities at risk, it's a real problem. So the levy is a 9.01 mil levy, basically $315 per $100,000 of value for the house or for the property.
But districts usually try to talk about all the good things they're doing. And if you want to keep this going, if you want to support all the good things we're doing, this is different. This is counterintuitive in a lot of ways.
But it's truthful. It's truthful, and I think it's realistic. It'd be nice to say, oh, we're doing such a great, give us the same amount of money or additional money so that we can continue with the good work. Of course you would be saying that. But if you're in a crisis, you need to mention that too.
Well, coming off this data rigging scandal, on top of the continued concerns about the performance of the schools, I mean, I don't know what other choice they had. I mean, I think you'd be lucky to get 30% of the voters to come out for a levy if you tried to paint this as all, roses and sunshine out there in the Columbus schools. I think they had to level with them and say, look, we know things are tough, but we're going to try to get them better.
I think what's interesting as far as the rally went this week is who they were, and it didn't include school board members. They were absent. They were the school board president was in the audience, but not up on the stage. And I'm wondering, what do you think about that, Joe? Does that tell you who it's coming from?
Well, I think it's kind of smart in a way, because if you look at the current school board members, they are part of this whole, they've been here for the data rigging, they've been here for all the different scandals that have come out of Columbus City Schools for the past couple of years. And so keeping them out of this and actually saying, hey, we know it's bad, but we have a plan to move forward, that has some element of attraction to a voter, because they think, oh, well, okay, they're admitting it's bad, and they have a plan, so, it can only get better from here. And I think that's what they're going for.
I just wanted to move on now. A campaign to legalize gay marriage in Ohio launched this week. What kind of campaign it is remains in question. The Why Marriage Matters campaign held rallies in 3 Ohio cities. It touts itself as an education campaign because gay leaders are still divided on when to put the issue before voters, next year or in 2016. A good example, the indecision in this exchange with State Representative Nikki Antonio.
I am very excited about this campaign. I think that this Why Marriage Matters campaign is going to be awesome. I'm very excited to be a part of it. And I got to get to my
As far as the ballot issue, you think that it's too early, essentially?
I did not say that. I said they've been invited to participate, and as
what are
you
your
heard
thoughts
Elizabeth say,
where do you stand
they're going to continue. I stand with this campaign. I think we have a lot of work to do to educate people in Ohio about why marriage matters.
Brenda Mack, when do gay marriage supporters stand a better chance of winning? Next year or 3 years from now?
I don't think that they stand a chance of winning.
Ever?
Here in Ohio. Let's just talk about Ohio. Ohio is a big Bible Belt state. People don't want it. If they wanted it, it would be no issue to put that on the ballot. I mean, if you think about other issues, people put them on the ballot, it's not an issue. You get them on that ballot. This issue, look how long it's taking. It's back and forth, back and forth. They don't know what they're going to do with it, and they know that people truly, bottom line, do not want this. It's wrong. It's not biblical. It does not it does not support our communities in any positive way to have gay marriages.
Well, notwithstanding the argument that Brenda certainly can have, I think society is moving in the direction. The most recent polling, which took place, I think, on September 3rd, showed that we were evenly split, I think, at 47%. And that is a move forward for about 10% from the previous time that this was on the ballot, which is not that long ago. So I think society is moving in that direction. But to quote our good friend Terry Casey, timing is everything. So that it's going to depend on when this might come on a ballot. On an off year, I think Brenda's side would prevail.
Yeah, and I think another thing to look at when we're talking about all this polling, you're right, it's very close in Ohio as far as gay marriage itself. But when you look at some elements of for example, equal pay, job protection, gay people being able to have some of the rights of, straight people in a community. When you look at those issues that are polled, you see very high numbers on those. And that might be why this campaign is going this direction.
When I look at gay marriages, I don't dispute that a person should have equal rights. I think that there should be equal rights for every human being. But gay unions do not benefit children. They do not benefit society, our communities in any way, shape, or form. I think that part of the reason why they're waiting as well is to see what happens in the elections. Like you said, I mean,
timing is everything.
Timing is
Okay,
everything.
and speaking of time for our final off-the-record parting shots. Joe Moss.
Indeed, Sunday begins Hispanic Heritage Month. This yearly observance celebrates the lives of 45 million Americans who self-identify as Hispanic or Latino. By the way, we're the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. The United States is.
Wow.
Okay, Brenda Mack.
Democrat, Republican, let's all just join together and make Ohio a better state, a stronger state. Love one another as God intended us to do.
Amen.
And Jim Singal.
I'm ready to predict the next speaker of the race. The next speaker in the Ohio House will remain unsettled for quite a while.
Joe Ingles.
This isn't a prediction as much as it is an observation. It was interesting that former Democratic Party Chair David Leland has jumped in the race for John Carney. We were talking about John Carney running for auditor. He's jumping in that race to take that seat, and that was very interesting. His campaign chair, Governor Strickland.
All right. Well, that's Columbus on the Record for this week. Please check us out online. We're on Facebook and Twitter. You can connect to all of that on our website at wosu.org/COTR. I'm Ann Fisher. Have a good week.